Hello. BookNet Canada acknowledges that its operations are remote, and our colleagues contribute their work from the traditional territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Wendat, and Mi'kmaq peoples, the original nations of the lands we now call Beaton, Brampton, Guelph, Halifax, Toronto, and Vaughan. We endorse the calls to action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada and support an ongoing shift from gatekeeping to space-making in the book industry. My name's Tim Middleton, and I want to thank you for tuning in to this year's BiblioShare talk at Tech Forum 2023. I'm the product coordinator for BNC BiblioShare at BookNet. This year, naturally, I will be giving you an update on our BiblioShare numbers, which I hope gives you a sense of the importance of this platform. I try to do that every year, and I will let you know about a couple of the projects that occupied the BiblioShare team, but I do that every year. It shouldn't be a surprise unless you haven't listened to a BiblioShare presentation before, but if you haven't, not to worry, we have quite a few in the archives that you can listen to. Just click through on some of our past Tech Forum postings, and you'll find BiblioShare in there. But this year I wanted to do something a little different as well. The reason I wanted to do this is really twofold. One, I was having a hard time putting together my presentation. Maybe I've given a few too many of them. Maybe COVID has done more damage to my creativity than I realize. Well, the second reason was because I like to keep up with the trends, of course. No, I'm not going to announce that we are launching Bish Talk, although that would be incredibly trendy, and I have to say I'm not that incredibly trendy. I just wanted to keep up with the trends. No, I'm not going to announce Bish Talk. I'm not going to announce we're launching Bish Talk in 2023, although that would be fun. And I'm not going to look at the trends that are driving sales. That is BNC Sales Data Land, and Monique Mongeon has already done a great job of that. If you really want to know what is trending in books and gift, I highly recommend you give her talk a listen. You can follow that link on the screen. There you will hear about the categories that are popping in BNC sales data and find out about everything trendy, from mushrooms and upcycling to Regency Core and Goblin Core. Yes, in BiblioShare we could let you know how many titles have keywords that are leveraging these trends, but I didn't do that. If you're interested in that, send us an email. We'll pull out the data. Instead, what I decided to do was invite some intelligence into this year's discussion. Yes, I decided to invite ChatGPT to the show. Well, at first I just asked ChatGPT to make my BiblioShare presentation because I heard that's what all the kids are doing. But it didn't go that well. ChatGPT hadn't really heard of BiblioShare yet and was giving credit to all sorts of other platforms for BiblioShare, which when I followed its trail showed me we had more education to do to get ChatGPT up to speed. But we aren't prepared to train an AI model on the BiblioShare dataset quite yet. We're still working on getting companies to transition to Onyx 3.0 for about 10 years now. 10 years after 2.1 has already been sunset. So artificial intelligence can wait. However, I took a step back and I asked more general questions, like, how do I write a presentation on bibliographic data? ChatGPT did a little better with this and was genuinely helpful if you're wondering about doing a bibliographic presentation to educational institutions for how to cite your quotes in your work, but the really crazy thing I saw here, and something that we fully agree with, is the importance of accuracy. Fourth down. fourth paragraph down, emphasize the importance of accurately recording bibliographic data to avoid plagiarism and to allow readers to locate the sources cited in your work. You can provide examples of how inaccurate or incomplete bibliographic data can cause problems for researchers. Yes, your inaccurate bibliographic data can cause problems for researchers. So here are some steps that can help you create an effective presentation on bibliographic data. And then it went on to give me some Biblio 101 instructions for creating a presentation. That is what you're looking at in this slide. Needless to say, I wanted to know more. I wanted to get beyond research and academic publishing. I wanted to zero in on the trade side of publishing, and ChatGPT obliged by stating, bibliographic data is important for the trade industry as well. Publishers, booksellers, and librarians rely on bibliographic data to accurately describe and categorize books. Here are some steps to consider when writing a presentation on bibliographic data for the trade book industry. And you can read all of the suggestions that it gave to me. Metadata elements, you might describe the various metadata elements that make up bibliographic data, like ISBN, title, author, publisher, publication date, format, genre, and audience. You should consider standards, explain the various standards that are used in the trade book industry to ensure that bibliographic data is consistent. It even mentions Onyx here. That's pretty awesome, and BISAC. And the challenges. So some of the challenges that arise from managing bibliographic data for the trade book industry, such as keeping up with new formats and technologies, dealing with errors and inconsistencies in data, and managing data across multiple platforms and systems. These are all really great concepts, and if you just follow this and start building from this, you're going to get somewhere in understanding bibliographic data. Well, I was getting hooked on ChatGPT and started to worry that I would never get this presentation done because the questions I could ask were endless, and so were the answers. But in ChatGPT's last answer, I focused in on the challenges that ChatGPT highlighted and asked it further. So the challenges with new formats and technologies. How do you deal with errors and inconsistencies in data and managing data across multiple platforms and systems? And again, ChatGPT graciously recognized that dealing with errors and inconsistencies in data and managing data across multiple platforms and systems can be challenging. And then our interviewee, ChatGPT, offered some tips that any of us in the metadata game could only nod our heads at and fully endorse. In fact, this is what we do all the time at BookNet on the BiblioShare team. We address these problems and we try to resolve them. We do use automated tools. We have established data management protocols. We regularly review and update data, and we'll do that with any of your companies. And we follow industry standards, and we implement quality control measures. ChatGPT does understand BiblioShare and does understand the problem space. The interview went on because I wanted to dive into each of those topics in more detail. But I will not make you endure each one of those questions, and only want to say one thing that really surprised me about this very smart, very helpful AI, is that it's very polite. At one point, ChatGPT told me something about the platform JSTOR that I questioned. And when I did it, the ChatGPT told me it was sorry, that its last answer may have misled me, and that the correct response should have been, and then it wrote the thing that it should have been. I was blown away by that. Did a little correction, and all you had to do was ask a simple question. Anyways, that was my attempt at being trendy. If nothing else, it showed me there is quite a lot of potential in throwing your questions at this AI. I asked it questions I assumed it would have no idea about, but it gave convincing answers on a number of those. Now, of course, I'm not saying you're going to replace your metadata team with ChatGPT, but I would think about using it to keep sharp in areas your team can't possibly handle or haven't thought about for some time. Just be aware, it won't create your entire presentation for you. You are still needed. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my usual self and update you a bit on BiblioShare. Let's start with the numbers. BiblioShare by the numbers. As many of you may know, Catalyst has been working with our French language sister organization, BTLF. And as you may also know, Catalyst gets data from BiblioShare. So that means BiblioShare is receiving data for BTLF as well. And we now have over 2 million covers for BTLF. That is a lot of more data for us to take care of and be in charge of. In 2022, the BiblioShare Onyx 2.1 dataset grew by about 225,000 records. As many records as this is, this number is actually 70,000 lower than what we received in 2021. Surprising, but our 3.0 dataset saw more than double the number of records year over year get added. I suppose this is a good place to remind you that BiblioShare treats 2.1 data and 3.0 data as completely discrete datasets. We don't do anything crazy like trying to fit the 2.1 data into the 3.0 framework, nor do we downgrade 3.0 data to the 2.1 framework. Although this means we are receiving what is basically duplicated data, 3.0 is not backwards compatible. At some point, 2.1 data will be a thing of the past, but until then, keep sending both your 2.1 and your 3.0 data to BiblioShare. We appreciate it. In this slide, we're looking at the daily workload of BiblioShare. So the ingestion of BiblioShare. So this is data for both new records and updated records. Because as ChatGPT reminds us, bibliographic data is not static, at least not until the thing it is describing is no longer available. Here we can see that the year 2022 was not a lot different than previous years, although that average updated figure looks pretty good over last year. That means companies are paying attention to their data and keeping it fresh. Looking at the 3.0 number, 3.0 data set, we see a big jump both in new records added and in the average for updated records. It is really starting to look like 3.0 data is becoming a thing, and it's only taken about 10 or 13 or so years to catch on. Amazing how fast things happen at times. All told, in 2022, we created 79 new or newish accounts in BiblioShare. That's plus 18% year over year. The breakdown of publisher and supplier Onyx accounts shows us we are still adding more 2.1 accounts than 3.0, but in the year over year view, we added 40% fewer 2.1 accounts this year, while the number of 3.0 accounts added was on par with last year. The story we're seeing here is the slowly ending of the life of 2.1 Onyx and the continuing growth of 3.0. This certainly should be sending signals to all of our data end users out there. If you haven't worked out your 3.0 migration yet, you better get on it. And then what continues to amaze us on the BiblioShare team, or at least myself at BookNet, is the volume of consumption of our data. So these are our web services and the use of Shopify plugin. We had 21 new accounts sign up who either wanted to use our web services in order to support their own solutions that they were building, or they wanted to start using our Shopify app in Shopify. And we continue to build the holdings in BiblioShare of supporting materials. So these are rich materials that we get outside of Onyx. There's a little caveat there that we do pull down cover images if they are embedded in the Onyx data with a valid URL, but that job we only run every month or so. So the best way to get us your supporting images and whatnot is to send them directly to FTP directory on BiblioShare, and then they get processed right away. Here we see that we added 7% to our cover images database. So we now have close to 3.5 million covers on hand. So this is 3.5 million covers. And then don't forget, we also got 2 million covers for the Beta LF project for Catalyst. So quite a few covers sitting in BiblioShare. Interior images, which are clearly one of the most obvious supports for everything from art books to children's books when consumers are making buying decisions, grew by 16% in 2022 to reach almost 500,000 images. That's a growth of 16% year over year. Author images continue to trickle along, and our author images grew by 4% in 2022. And here's a look at how the rest of the supporting materials database is growing. As you recall, we just added teacher's guides and back covers just a few years ago. So they're slowly climbing. The back covers are being consumed and are coming in quite handy on e-commerce sites. The explosive growth of the first couple of years for the samples and excerpts holdings has tapered off, but hopefully this is because we are just in a regular workflow now to deliver those as part of your book records. And so there's no great backlog to be uploaded and things are just sort of ticking along. At least that's my takeaway from looking at the numbers here. And always interesting, again, for me, hopefully for you, is to see what kind of data and how much of it we are continuously processing. But equally interesting is this question. Is the data being used, and who is using all of this data? Well, once again, our web services were very busy. You can see we have 133 million. This 133 million number excludes any of our in-house use of the APIs, so that excludes sales data, which uses covers, Catalyst that uses bibliographic data, covers, position files, and Bibliomatic, and wherever else we're using our APIs. We use the exact same APIs that are publicly available. And so we're eating our own dog food. Things are working. Proof is in the pudding. And that's 158 users. That's up probably about 20 users year over year. So we added 20 new web service clients in the year. And now here's a list of all the active web services and what is being pulled. So we have quite a few of them. Onyx, image info, full image. You can find out about all of these web services again in our documentation, our help documentation for data distribution. And you're more than welcome to use any of these APIs. I've also got Shopify in there, so that's not exactly an API, but it does use our APIs, and you can see there's a growth of 1.8 million there. So obviously Onyx is still the biggie, but I noted that the number of requests to the service dropped dramatically this year. Now, that could have to do with any number of reasons, including the possibility that last year someone had to draw down a lot of data to either prime their new solution or repair something that got broke. That's always a possibility. This, I suppose, is the limit of just giving a number without any context. You don't really know that information. But the other possibility is that solutions are getting smarter with these services. One signal I pick up from these numbers is the increase in usage of our BiblioSimple web service. BiblioSimple is basically a stub record that is a lightweight Onyx we create from the full Onyx we receive. So it's not the full Onyx, and it's really, if you think of looking at a preview page on a website for a book, you just see a little bit of information on there. That's basically BiblioSimple. So stub can be a great service to use on a preview page or in blogs where you don't really need the full Onyx goodness to support your sales and marketing. Also, a nice bump in our Shopify support, as I mentioned earlier, with almost 2 million extra calls being made. To answer that question I asked at the beginning of this segment, here's a list of our top 40 users of BiblioShare web services. These are the heavy users. The cool thing about this list is that it shows the flexibility of our services. These users in this list are made up of solution providers like ReaderBound, library wholesalers who have in-house solutions like Whitehot and LibraryBound, Shopify users, lots of Shopify users, publisher sites, distributor sites, retail sites, and author sites. And of course, you may have noticed I left in the BookNet products in this list. So although I removed them, backed them out earlier, I left them in here just so you can see that, well, we're not even the heaviest user of our own APIs. The industry is using APIs more fully than we do at BookNet. We're not the only heavy user. So that was a quick tour through 2022 for BiblioShare data, the growth of our data set. Our focus remains on Onyx 3.0 data and migrating solutions and support to that data set, but we also had a couple of other projects that kept us busy. You may know we built an app for the Shopify platform. I think I've mentioned it a few times here. We built that some years ago and is now being used by close to 70 shops, including retailers, publishers, and distributors, and authors too, I suppose. We have two flavors of the app built for using our 2.1 dataset and a third version that pulls from our 3.0 Onyx dataset. Shopify is a dynamic platform and always making changes. But this past year, they made a change to their policy about unpublished apps. Our app was an unpublished app. We were happy with it in that state, but the policy change would make our app obsolete, since now users would not be allowed to use an unpublished app. This meant we had to submit our app for the Shopify review. It was a bit of a hurdle for us to get past this review. Shopify is pretty strict on the way that apps get installed and uninstalled, not to mention other frequent changes that they make to their APIs and functionality. As I said, we weren't planning on publishing our app, so when we received the policy change announcement in September, we had to carve out some time to work on things. And you can now find our app at the URL apps.shopify.com/app19778. We've kept it hidden in the shop so you can't search for it and find it, but you can because you really still need to request a user token from us. You'll probably still need support from us, even though you'll be able to connect with us through the Shopify App Store. But you can get a token from the BookNet website under the BiblioShare product. Fill out the form for accessing data from BiblioShare. We'll send you the token, and we'll send you the link to the app for installing. And even though our app is now published in the Shopify App Store, we still recommend using the Bibliomatic browser extension to help you figure out if data is in our BiblioShare database or not. As mentioned last year, our Bibliomatic plugin, which was updated, now exposes data from both our 2.1 dataset or the 3.0 dataset if the data exists. I've come to think of Bibliomatic as an indispensable tool for troubleshooting, since you have at your fingertips a tool that will show you the metadata across all of the BNC platforms, including the raw Onyx data that we have on hand and links to the title and sales data and Catalyst. Don't leave work without it. And since I'm talking about troubleshooting your data, I will just highlight once again this very valuable web service that we built called Bish Assets. This web service will show you whatever data we have on a title that can include both versions of Onyx, a position file, cover images, and any other supporting material that has been sent to BiblioShare. A number of people are starting to use this in-house and often know more about what we have in our data set than I know myself. And finally, to round out this year's presentation, I want to draw your attention to a new file that we began generating almost a year ago, and that is a flat file that contains all of the ISBNs that are new to BiblioShare that day. We generate a file each for both the 2.1 Onyx dataset and the 3.0 dataset. The data consists, as you can see on this screen, of the EAN, the timestamp, when it was added to the dataset, the main BISAC code, if it has one, and the product form. One thing this feed accomplishes is to keep anyone using the BiblioShare data up to date. You can grab the list of ISBNs and start pulling the new data down to your own servers and applications. Access to these files is on our FTP server and is controlled by a login and password. Again, you can request this from us at any time. Like many of the offerings from BiblioShare, this is yours for free, simply for the asking. Well, that in a nutshell is the year in BiblioShare. Oh, of course, we worked on a number of custom projects for companies looking to pull metadata for their catalogs. We often have capacity to work with companies on custom applications, but not always. If you are in the market for a custom solution, then let us know. We may be swamped at the time of asking, and we won't be able to give you a hand, but it doesn't hurt to ask. Thank you very much. Hopefully see you next year.